Brittany region of northwest France. Steeped in cycling tradition, it has hosted the Road World Championships and been visited several times by the Tour de France. Since 1931, it has been the site of an elite circuit race as well, the Grand Prix Pluoay. And the 2013 edition of that race starts right now here on Universal Sports. And it has drawn some big names, including Tour de France champion Alberto Contador in his first race back since this year's Tour, along with the likes of France's own Sylvain Chavanel of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team, a three-time stage winner at the Tour, and young Frenchman Arnaud Démare, a sprinter for the FDJ team. This was earlier today, the start under sunny skies with warm temperatures in northwest France. The riders rolling out on a course that will feature 9 laps of a 27-kilometer circuit, 2 hard climbs per circuit. It can become a race of attrition over the course of a few hours on the bike. Steve Schlang alongside Todd Gagulski. Now we pick up the action with just over 2 laps left to go, 55 kilometers left to race, and this is a 4-man breakaway that went clear pretty much near the beginning of the stage, and right now their margin is at 3 minutes and 21 seconds.
Steve, and every year this race, it seems to always come down to those final couple of kilometers and whether or not the breakaway can hang on. 2 of the last 3 years, it's been won by a late race attack. 1 of those years, it was a field sprint.
Our 4 riders coming across the start-finish line for the beginning of the penultimate lap right now. Vegard Langen is a 24-year-old Norwegian from the Bretagne team. He's joined by Natniel Burhe, the Eritrean 22-year-old from Europcar, Christophe Labarrie of Soyasoon, and Julien Fouchard of the Cofidis team. Earlier, this group had a lead of over 16 minutes at 1 point. Also noteworthy, Andy Schleck, who recently raced in Colorado, was back in Europe. He pulled out of the race at the midway point. So this main field gave these 4 riders quite a lot of rope early on, but we see how the gap has been coming down now, and it's just over 3 minutes. As I pointed out, it's really a race of attrition. You have 2 hard climbs on every lap, so as you continue to go over those climbs, the legs start to feel heavy with each ensuing lap, and eventually a group like this starts to fade away.
And when you think about how long they're in the saddle today, it's about a 6-hour day for the guys, as 243 kilometers equates to 151 miles. That's exactly the distance the old U.S. Pro Championship was in its different names in Philadelphia. And so a long day like that with those multiple climbs on every lap, it does add up.
Now, knowing that attrition is going to play a large role, still giving any group 16 minutes, you're taking a chance. That's a lot of time. So how does a breakaway know how much leash to give? How do they know when enough is too much?
Well, the peloton, they do this calculation, and they also are playing a bluffing game at the same time. So the calculation is looking at the guys who are up the road and the teams that they're with, and knowing how strong they are and how much strength their teams have. Then it's bluffing your competitors that are back in the peloton to try and get some other teams to start chasing so that you don't use up all your guys doing the chase.
Well, very nice day. 75 degrees, sunny skies, as the gap now tricks down in just under 3 minutes now, as the field is now coming across the start-finish line, and they'll begin to start their final 2 laps around the course. Sylvain Chavanel's Omega Pharma Quick-Step team leading the charge with the light blue shoulders, dark and white colors, and a big crowd for this race that started way back in 1931. The course has changed over the years, but still always drawing a pretty well-known field of high-profile riders.
Thomas Vogler was in the middle of that last shot, the Europcar rider who always is fairly active in this race, sticking his tongue out. He always makes some pretty interesting faces. He basically telegraphs his suffering all over his face.
Some guys hide it better than others. Some guys don't even try to hide it, like Vogler.
I almost think he tries to exaggerate it and ham it up a little bit.
Now the Eritrean here for Europe car in that green jersey, the 22-year-old. Two-time African road race champ, second overall at the Tour of Turkey this year, also a winner of stage number 3, so not to be taken lightly.
Actually, I have to agree that Nathaniel Berhane in the break he's a really interesting rider. When he went across to the break a couple of years ago at the World Championships in the under-23 Worlds, he was incredibly fluid and supple on the bike, and when he got up to that breakaway, he really drove it. And I thought, you know what? This is a guy we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the future.
Well, this race, not unlike a World Championships, you have several laps of the same circuit. You have a hard course with some climbing. And the dynamic tends to play out the same way. The break goes, it eventually gets brought back late in the race, and then the winning moves start to get set up later on.
And indeed, with the course like it is, it's very much similar to the World Championship road course from 2000. And whenever you have a World's road course, it almost always is sort of this blend of hills and flats, and so that nobody can ever predict in advance if it's going to be a big bunch finish or if a breakaway is going to stay away. And they try to make it, the Road World's, always a course for the all-rounder and for the guy who just does everything right on the day, and that's exactly the type of course we have here today.
So the Omega Pharma Quick Step team continues to lead the way. Sylvain Chavanel, the Frenchman, riding on home turf, the most well-known rider for that team among the crowd that's come out today. And Chavanel looking for his first ever win in this race. May come as a little surprise that French riders have won this race more than any other nation, but they haven't won since 2008. Eric Federigo was the last Frenchman to win this. Since then, it's been won by 2 Aussies, a Slovenian, and a Norwegian. And Von Bosenhagen of Norway and Team Sky was the most recent winner last year, but not racing this year. He is at the Vuelta a España. Speaking of Thomas Voeckler, his Europe car team launching an attack. Voeckler himself a former winner of this race back in 2007, but right now he has a rider in the breakaway, another rider attacking. Omega Pharma Quick Step covering here with just over 50K left.
You can see how attentive everybody is in the peloton with this attack going.
What do you make of this move here, still so far from the finish?
It seems a little bit over-exuberant for Cyril Gauthier. Now, Gauthier is a guy who loves to attack, but the breakaway is 2.5 minutes up the road. So what are you going to do? Bridge up to a breakaway that has 4 guys with fading legs and then somehow stave off the peloton? Unlikely. And plus he has a teammate up the road as well. But you can see the Omega Pharma Quick Step rider not really that interested in working at this point. Just saying, you know what, we're going to leave this, let the sleeping dogs lie, and we'll keep riding for our team leader, Chavanel.
Very curious here. 51K remaining. Gap down to 221. Cyril Gauthier making this move from the Europe car team. Using a lot of energy with still a lot of road still to cover. And the Katusha rider coming up from the field behind on one of the 2 climbs on this course. Now these climbs also can't be taken too lightly. Second one hits pitches of 10%. And when you do that 9 different times, eventually it's an accumulated fatigue that you feel in your legs.
Indeed, and it looks like this attempt has been neutralized. Let's see if somebody else decides to counterattack or if things will settle back down once again in the peloton.
I don't think anybody wants to counterattack. I think they just want to settle it back down and normalize the race here. We're still so far to go. Gauthier maybe not making a lot of friends here as the Sky Rider now accelerates. Cannondale, Astana responding. Omega Pharma Quick Step still there as well. But a long line of riders here. Nobody really getting away. Still a 4-man breakaway. Lead of now 2 minutes with 50K left. Omega Pharma Quick Step continuing their familiar position at the front of the field. 48 kilometers left to go. We are on the penultimate lap of 9 around a 27-kilometer circuit in northwest France in the annual running of a race that a lot of people just call Pluoay. Happens late summer every year. Almost 8 decades long. This is now the 77th edition of this race that started back in the early 30s.
And Steve, if you want to put a little bit of a button on how important this race is in the calendar, it is a World Tour event. There are 28 World Tour events. It's the 24th of 28. So it always draws a quality field, even though it directly overlaps with the Vuelta a España, as well as some of the races in North America right now that riders go over to do Colorado, Alberta, and then they do the one-day races, the World Tour races in Quebec and Montreal as well.
Yeah, some riders like Andy Schleck, who we mentioned earlier, pulled out at the halfway point today. He went to Colorado, did the USA Pro Challenge, flew back to Europe, is doing this race, and he's going back to North America for Montreal and Quebec. So,
yeah, I think I would have pulled out too. What time zone is he on?
So what type of rider would you suspect would do this type of race over, let's say, the Vuelta at this point in the season?
A rider who is just using a totally different sort of preparation for the World Championships, where they want to sort of get involved in that lottery style of racing. And I don't mean that exactly, but if you look at the Vuelta, for instance, a lot of guys go through the Vuelta to prepare for the Worlds, and once you get the general classification established there, then stage hunters can capitalize on the dynamics of the GC. Whereas in a one-day race like this, or the other one-day races, Montreal, Quebec, and so on, it's wide open every day. This is like a mini classic race, so you have every potential possibility for the day, and there's no weirdness because of a GC battle going on.
Now, a race like this has the same components and the same foundation as the World Championships, but as we've talked about, the Worlds can be such a gamble. There are so many variables. It can come down to a lottery in so many cases. So on balance, isn't the best thing to do for preparation for a World Championships road race just to get your fitness dialed in as much as possible? And wouldn't you do that at a race like the Vuelta?
Well, yes, and I think that's why most guys do that. But if you want to take another look at it, well, part of winning the Worlds is really being in tune with that sense of tactically what you need to do in a split second. And so a one-day race like this is a lot more like the Worlds than the Vuelta is. So, you know, you kind of get into this sort of juxtaposition of getting tons of fitness from one and having an unusual dynamic there because it's a stage race, or actually being in a one-day race like Pluoay and saying, all right, I'm gonna try and sort of get my senses about me to figure out how to win a one-day race that's totally unpredictable.
Where's the risk-reward ratio fall in doing a one-day race like this and maybe a series of one-day events versus a 3-week Grand Tour?
Yeah, you know, it's just different. It's just a different perspective and a different approach by different guys. Alberto Contador is in this race here. He has said that he wants to try and win the Worlds. I could tell you right now that it's going to be incredibly difficult for Alberto Contador to win the Worlds. And it's not because he's in this race and not in the Tour de France. In fact, or excuse me, the Vuelta a España, it's because he can't do the Vuelta and then the Worlds because he just did the Tour, you know. So that's another part of the element. It's like if you race the Tour de France in July, full gas, and then not even a month later you started the Vuelta and raced that really hard, by the time you get to the World Championships, you don't even want to race your bike anymore. You're so raced out. So that's another aspect that guys would be thinking of.
Gap starting to hold steady now at 147 with just under 45 kilometers left to go. This route that is 27 kilometers in length that they're doing 9 different times is a counterclockwise circuit. They make a vertical loop and then a horizontal loop, if you can picture that, and they do it 9 different times. Something to know when they come down to the finish at the end of the next lap for the end of the race, they do have a headwind going down the finishing straight. So that always makes a difference in terms of the sprint, and in particular, when to launch your sprint.
It also makes it hard for a solo rider to stay in front after they go up the final climb, which sort of is 2 little humps, but the last one tops out just over a kilometer from the finish line, and that's where we've seen the win.